This is Hospitality and Politics. I am Andrew Ridgie. The show, as always, powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. And I am with Pamela Silvestri. She is the food editor of the Staten Island Advance and SI Live. And we've been friends and spoken on numerous different issues over the years, all things restaurants, all things Staten Island. Sometimes politics gets thrown in as well. And I suspect this is going to be a wide-reaching interview where we talk about all of this stuff. But first, I do have to look before I forget, because I'll remember later, is she brought me a gift. Can I look at these beautiful tomatoes? Thank you.
My pleasure.
Where did this come from?
My garden at home. It is the last of our summer tomatoes. And they are so ripe and juicy. They're actually literally bursting. I put them in the paper bag, which
smell them when I opened it up.
Bit more.
Like, yeah.
Good. I'm
Beautiful.
glad. Enjoy.
Thank you. I will.
And just so you know, when you cut it open and that Staten Island water and the Staten Island minerals are in there, it is like completely lush and juicy. And it's going to be the most amazing couple of tomatoes you've ever had.
That is amazing. It's going to be very tough. If any future guests try to bring something to me on this show, they got some real competition now. So anyways, thank you. First, let's set it up. Just tell me a little bit about your job and what you do.
I have a wonderful job at the Staten Island Advance. I get to eat and taste everything that's put in front of me. It is a blessing and a curse. Mm-hmm. I will never be a size 2, for one thing. And also, there are some things that I'll taste that I may never taste again, but I've tasted them once. And, it's people on Staten Island, especially restaurant owners, are very anxious to share and love to feed you. And so Staten Island is my place to be.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the current state of the Staten Island restaurant scene right now, because there are so many different restaurants, great restaurants, but you're really in there day and out, eating at different restaurants, talking with different restaurateurs. How would you describe just the state of restaurants on Staten Island?
Well, we're going through a little bit of a boom in the convenience and, market industry. Mm-hmm. That's sort of taking away a little bit from the dining aspect of it. And also there's a lot of franchises that are opening. That is what's really going on. There's the places that are kind of the highlights, I think, are the old school places that really kind of capture the uniqueness of Staten Island, the bucolic setting and so on and so forth. And off the top of my head, I can think of several. One is Angelina's, which is all the way in Tottenville, from shore to shore. Then there's also South Fin Grill, which is right on the water on the boardwalk. Basilio Inn, which is one of the oldest restaurants in New York City. Yeah. Established in the early 1900s. It's a carriage house and a place for Italian immigrants to go to enjoy the beach. And then also Blue Restaurant, which is on the North Shore of Staten Island on Richmond Terrace. And that overlooks kind of the more industrial side of Jersey. But you can get a phenomenal waterside view with all the tugboats and the ships coming into the harbor. It's really remarkable.
That's nice. So because I go Staten Island, I'm there a bunch of times every year and try to go to, different restaurants. And I have a bunch of friends that either grew up on Staten Island or have restaurants there. And, we're a 5-borough city. And I always hate to think people are like, oh, Staten Island's the forgotten borough. It's this or that. But when you go there, and I love restaurants and food, and I love people. And I feel like Staten Island has like real people. It has real restaurants. Not that there's not real people, real restaurants elsewhere, but there's something I think that goes to maybe part of the charm, like you're saying, kind of that old school restaurant vibe. And I feel like in many ways, in a lot of places, and this is not just Staten Island, like we've started to lose a lot of restaurants that kind of make you reminisce of, I don't know, your kid growing up, or if you had like a family business in the restaurant industry. There's so many amazing, great restaurants, but a lot of them we talk about tend to be, the newer spots that have been opening up. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know you have a family history in the restaurant business as well, about just maybe the old school restaurant guard versus the new school restaurant guard and how that's playing out maybe on Staten Island?
Interesting. Staten Island is very, very New York as far as I'm concerned with the hospitality and an old school charm. I'd say like Brioso and La Strada on New Dorp Lane, they embrace a lot of that, old school sentiment, with the charm. Also, Stonehouse, Clove Lakes Park, beautiful setting. It's Peter Botros, yes. Everybody knows Peter. And he does a lot for, the James Beard Foundation and does a lot, with charitable work and showing his competitive edge, which is pretty impressive. And then, also in terms of another one of your members, actually, at Pienza at the Hilton Garden Inn setting over in Bloomfield. They have a whole conservancy there right in the middle of the nature preserve. But what's kind of old school about it is the music that's always kind of filtering through the garden there. Yeah. It's very charming. And that's where the advance offices are, actually. So I have the luxury of going to the office sometimes and walking through Pienza's beautiful property. It's very nice.
It's great. I mean, I know Peter and Phil, they have a bunch of restaurants. I know they've been opening elsewhere as well, but obviously the Nicotras. Our friend, was it lunch? That was years ago, though, with Massimo, and that was at Vinum.
That's right.
Which was such a, what was that, Bay Street?
It's on Bay Street. Well, Vinum closed. Vinum closed, but what Massimo Felici is is award-winning restaurant owner who's a member of the Alliance.
On our board as well.
And he folded Vinum into Don Cheech, which was a concept that was more, kind of down-home Italian. Originally, his idea was actually checkered tablecloths and whatnot, but what he went with eventually was blending the old school with a kind of a really new open design with this solarium that he has off the side of the restaurant, which is very
beautiful.
Nice.
I went there when they first opened, and it was so good. I have great memories of Vinum, too, because every year, actually this year we didn't go. My wife and daughter and I, we usually go, is it the Staten Island Fair or is it called something else in August or September? But then,
I don't know. Richmond County Fair.
Yes. And we would go to the restaurant afterwards. I remember one time we sat there for 4 hours, we're going to talk about fine dining a little bit, but that's like a fine dining experience. But at Vinum, which, was more casual than fine dining, but so good and just, feeding us, and he's an excellent chef and such a character.
He's a character. He is.
And you get a lot of the personalities as well that I think shine through the restaurant, shine through the food, and you get to write about it, which we're going to talk about. But tell me your history. So you said your family had a restaurant, you worked in restaurants, because that probably informs your writing now about food.
Yes.
And about restaurants.
Absolutely. And all of the above. I worked in the restaurant business. I had my own restaurant. My husband and I ran a restaurant called American Grill. We were the first Michelin acknowledged restaurant on Staten Island.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
And, thank you. And that was years ago, and kind of an interesting story. What really put us on the map actually was that, long story short, when we were really slow at lunch and in those early days, I would go around and hand out menus to people on the island. The only people really around were politicians, attorneys and real estate people. So in those early days, those were the people who were coming in, including politicians. Eventually, long story short, Mayor Bloomberg came into the restaurant, and not as mayor, but before he won. And when I comped his check, he said, "You know what? I really can afford it. Whatever you want, that's very kind of you. What do you want? I'll, anything you want." I said, "Listen," I said, "just please come back. If you win, I would really appreciate it if you could come back as a patron of the restaurant." And he did. The day after he won, a couple of days after he won, he came to Staten Island with his entourage and his girlfriend at the time, Diana. And they had a lovely dinner. And he became a very nice customer. He was very good to me over the years. And it made the New York Times, actually. It was in the New York Times and the International Herald Tribune. It was talking about, why does Mayor Bloomberg go to Staten Island? And why does he go to Queens? And why does he go to these little mom and pop places? But he was good like that. He would patronize. Cool. It's very nice. Very
nice. So how does that help inform your food writing? I mean, because I feel like when you're going and you're writing about restaurants, it's one perspective if you're just a restaurant consumer and you're a foodie and you're someone that goes out, the way you write. But clearly, if you've been in the industry, and particularly if you've owned a restaurant before, you have a better understanding about everything that goes into making that dining experience happen. So are there certain things that you can kind of recall that maybe happened in your restaurant experience that inform how you write or report on the industry these days?
That's what a question. I one of the things that I find is probably to my detriment on some levels. It's hard to criticize restaurants when you know, like, what coming from a world of like, oh my gosh, are we going to make payroll this week? And like, this law changed and I don't understand it. And how did I not know this? I mean, those were the things. Now, being a writer, I can sort of get around that by paying attention to what's going on in city council and what's going on in community board meetings. And I make a pest of myself going to those things and paying attention to that and writing about it. And, my hope is just to, coming from the business, is to make sure that those people who do not have time to go to the meetings and participate in that have an educated opinion or an educated background on how to formulate opinions, how to vote and things like that. I don't tell them how to vote, but...
Well, let me just say, what you just said is such like an industry thing, making payroll every week.
Yes.
I think that is often lost on a lot of people, what it means when you have a whole team of people relying on you for that paycheck. And when you have that slow lunch or slow lunches during the week, or the weather impacts you, the type of pressure that it creates. And then you mentioned the changing rules, the changing regulations. A lot of people get into the industry because they're passionate about serving people, about food and creating a great experience. And perhaps they were not, lawyers or, compliance people. And then all of a sudden, when they get into the business, they realize like, oh, I got to figure all of this out. And there can often be a lot of frustration with the rules, the regulations, the feeling that government or others don't understand the pressures of what it is like to have to make that payroll every week, and that you're going to be the last person to take a paycheck home. So can you talk a little bit about what you hear when you're conducting these interviews and you're speaking with restaurateurs? Like, what are the challenges and frustrations that they're feeling that they express to you?
Well, aside from taxes and all the financial stuff, one of the things that I hear that is really devastating to restaurant owners is when they see criticism of themselves on Yelp or online, or somebody, takes it out on them on social media, or on a Facebook post or whatnot that underneath an advance article, they, take it very seriously. And,
I imagine personally too, seriously
very personally.
And personally,
It's hard to have a thick skin when you're the ones, staffing it, and if somebody doesn't show up and you're behind the line. And I mean, that is not an easy job. I do believe that a restaurant owner is, and especially a retired restaurant owner or one who has given up the business and moved on to another career, I do believe that those are the most incredible people. And those are probably the people that I would hire first if they ever came for a job. You had one guest on your show, and I just want to use your question to illustrate that. Jeffrey Garcia, was it? And he's
the executive director of the city's Office of Nightlife.
He was an outstanding guest, and he exemplifies how experience in the industry makes you not only empathetic to the business owner on a lot of levels, when politicians are not, because they do not. Legislators, have very few and far between, have been in the business itself, and they are very, they handily make laws and penalize the restaurant owner and small business owner. It is a pet peeve of mine. It is something that I hope that the newspaper helps amplify the voices of entrepreneurs. But Jeffrey was really, I thought, illustrated truly what somebody from the industry can do to help other people and bring them up as opposed to put them down. Yeah.
Well, listen, I think one of the things of the Hospitality Alliance that has been such a focus of ours is to try to change the relationship between the restaurant industry, the nightlife industry, and government. Because so often for so many years, and really one of the reasons we formed the Hospitality Alliance was to give our industry a voice in the halls of government. And we had advocated for the creation of the city's Office of Nightlife. And I think Jeffrey Garcia is an excellent person to have in that role because he was in the NYPD. He had owned, restaurants. He had been an advocate with the Latino Restaurant and Nightlife Association. He was on the Hospitality Alliance's board and then went into this position. So he's able to understand and put himself in the shoes of someone in the industry. He can understand the complexities of all these different kind of political, regulatory issues, and be in city government trying to help, recognizing that, government is complicated, it's poses different challenges, but it doesn't have to be adversarial. There
Right.
can also be a working relationship. So I think that's a good model. And I'm so happy you listened to that episode and kind of took that away, because it's the kind of conversations we're trying to have. And also to have restaurateurs, you mentioned some of the frustrations that they have, knowing that, there are good people in government that are working hard to try and, support businesses. Sometimes they can't fix every issue, but, it's good to have like a hospitality alliance on the outside, and then people inside government that, that care. I think that's the thing.
Do you ever see abatements for new restaurant owners where they make improvements on a landlord's property? Do you ever see that?
Not often. I mean, there may be something, in the tax code somewhere for certain types of work. There's certain new equipment or, upgrading different systems, but not just like a direct overall abatement that I'm aware of. But I mean, one of the things is that having skillful people, and you probably know this, that like there are so many different professionals. There's a lot of different lawyers, there's a lot of different accountants, there's a lot of different real estate brokers out there. But it is so important to work with a specialist, someone that specializes in the industry, like when you're dealing with the liquor license, when you're dealing with a restaurant lease, because there are these nuances that may come up, building out a restaurant kitchen, being able to kind of navigate and guide you to what kind of support may be available. On the thing about, Yelp, and when you on, SI Live, post a story, and if there's criticism of the restaurants, do you see the restaurants responding back? Are there any best practices that you've seen, like how people respond? Because I always feel like it's a thin line between, there's criticism of your restaurant, and how do you handle it? Some people want to be defensive. Other people want to invite the guests back, say, we're sorry you had that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen any best practices or anything unique happen by like a back and forth in the comment section? Because I know some of your stories, they really can get a lot of comments, a lot of traction.
They do. What's interesting is it's interesting to see how people take a bad thing and turn it into a good thing. And I think that's the sign of a very good person and a very good restaurant owner, that they can kind of like turn a bad situation around. Often the response is to reach out on Yelp itself or on the social media post and grab that person and get their attention, and either take the conversation off to the side if it's really an awful thing. But I find on public websites where you don't have control over the comments, the worst thing that you could do is have the comment removed. That sort of ignites a firestorm.
So what stories, are there a few stories that you've published that seem to get the most attention? Because I know every so often, we talk right here, something like, oh, Pam put out this story and people are, up in arms talking about this, talking about that. What stories have gotten the most attention, and why do you think that?
Oddly enough, I really stay away from politics.
Okay.
That really is just a taboo subject. I cannot. Just the mere mention of like the big beautiful bill, even though it has a lot of concessions for the food service industry, it just attracts these negative comments. But oddly enough, I wrote a story about a chicken. We have chickens at home, or had chickens at home, and our last one died.
Oh, I'm
just
sorry.
Of old age. And thank you. And I got such an outpouring of love from people, especially on Staten Island. A lot of them raised chickens.
Yeah.
And I got like condolence notes and things like that.
Wow.
So yeah. So when it's a happy subject, the other subject that I get a lot of response on, believe it or not, is anything related to food celebrities. If you do own a restaurant, I would suggest making an offshoot cottage industry of whatever you're doing and try to become a celebrity on TikTok or, social media, because it really brings a lot of people in. But I just also, let's see, what another great one. Oh, and anything talking about nostalgia. Nostalgia is a firestorm of activity for comments, and emails and letters and everything else.
And that kind of like some of the old school restaurants and when they close and.
Yes, absolutely. Especially closures. Closures are huge news. And it could be like a pizzeria on a corner, or we wrote about a pizzeria called Pizzeria Mia. And it was around for quite a long time. And, Classic Pizza. My apologies. And Classic Pizza was in business for easily a couple of decades, 3 decades maybe. Anyway, they really were missed. When we wrote about them closing, oh my goodness, it was like, all hell broke loose. People poured the news of the place closing. Just people were pouring into the restaurant.
People are just so connected to restaurants. I mean, it's so amazing. I actually popped in. My family doesn't still own the last bakery that's open, but I popped in not too long ago because it's still there under new owners. So it's been 60 plus years, and some of the same people were working there for ever and ever. And you just go and you start reminiscing and talking, and like this person's kid worked there, and they used to go and get their birthday cakes and this and that, and grab their coffee. And there is such a human connection to whether it's your local restaurant, pizzeria, you name it. So when these places close, people feel like they're really losing, a member of the family. And
when they're in jeopardy or somebody like says something pejorative about them, oh my goodness. And I'll give you an example of that. Holterman's Bakery is one of the oldest bakeries in New York State. It's one of the oldest food businesses in New York State. Okay, it's on Staten Island. It's on Arthur Kill Road, and they were not even mentioned on The View. But Whoopi Goldberg threw some shade at the bakery because she turned like sort of an innocent matter of the bakery not being able to fulfill an order for her birthday with these little cups. It's Charlotte Russe. It's something that the bakery is known for. And Holterman's actually has this very signature polka dot white push-up cup that has the Charlotte Russe in it. And anyway, but the picture of it was shown on The View, and it was like this firestorm. People were really offended. They were really offended, hurt on behalf of the bakery and its owners. And the bakery really didn't know that it had done that, but they got like hate from across the country about like being racially motivated on not being able to fulfill an order. But it had to do with the fact that they couldn't commit to the order because an oven had broken a week before. So, I mean, it's an old bakery. It's just to use your platform to be negative of it like that was really I think hurtful.
Someone sent me something recently about an incident that happened at a restaurant, and there was a firestorm. And I think kind of going back to restaurants and food and politics is that now, in the past, before social media, people had opinions, but it was like, unless you had a platform, your opinion wasn't just going everywhere. But now everyone has an opinion. They can get it out there often without even thinking it through. And it's really unfortunate that, a restaurant, a local small business can get put into the firestorm of comments, whether it's about whatever the issue is.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, it's like, you're just trying to run your business, make people happy.
Yep.
And once something gets out there in social media world, like often the truth doesn't matter or the situation doesn't matter, or someone just glances at it and they don't understand the full context, and it's really disappointing and sad when that happens.
It is.
So when you're talking about restaurateurs, what's the frustration? I mean, I always say like my real job's being a restaurateur therapist. So, people are like, oh, you're out eating at restaurants all the time. That's amazing. I'm like, it is amazing. But when I'm out there, we're often talking about, the challenges, the frustrations and everything. So what do you hear from restaurateurs on Staten Island? Because I know, I get sent messages. There's like WhatsApp groups. There's this, there's that. So what do you hear about the frustrations from
labor?
Labor
is massive. People don't show up. They cannot get qualified people. It's a lot of kids coming through that, are glued to their phones. People who just the food life is a disciplined life on a lot of levels. You have to follow rules. You have to put your hair back. You have to, do certain things, walk a certain way. And people don't, I guess there's this part of our culture that is developed where people just don't want to follow the rules. Yeah. And it just doesn't work like that with an employer-employee relationship. But I will say very sternly that the training programs for small business owners, and what they have in place is in the long term unfortunate and just detrimental to having a long-time employee, because a small business owner generally doesn't have access to the time or patience to really train employees very thoroughly.
Yeah.
I see like Trader Joe's, they take a whole couple of weeks, they have a new store on Staten Island and Pleasant Plains, and the training process to just, load shelves and handle everything in the store is a big deal. That's one person training a crew of people, or a bunch of people training a crew. But we don't necessarily have that in the restaurant business. And there's no luxury of time, when you're trying to put out orders.
Especially when you're a small family-owned business and you're putting out fires and you're short of people, to have a whole kind of sophisticated training program in place is really, really tough. And if you have people also that, aren't looking at the restaurant industry as a career, maybe it's just, hey, it's a quick job while I'm on to something else, or I need a couple of bucks. They may not be as invested in, kind of growing their skill sets and their experience. And when you're dealing with people, it's the hospitality, it's the service, it's the quality, all these standards you need to hold up. And if you don't have the whole team buying into that, it can really start, falling apart. And then people have a bad experience, and then they go on Yelp or into the comment sections, and it starts to snowball and creates other issues. So the labor issue, that's, something we just, constantly hear, just because it's such a labor intensive business. All right, let's talk about good stuff, exciting stuff. So what are we talked about some of the kind of old school Staten Island restaurants that have been around for a long time. Are there any places that are newer that you recommend people go check out, or that are doing anything really interesting?
It's not the newest restaurant, but it is newer. I do enjoy Pasta Vino on Staten Island. It is run by Vic Rallo and a couple of Staten Islanders, and it is just a lovely restaurant. It's right near the water. It's very enjoyable, like kind of nouveau Italian cuisine. Very nice. It's always nice. I love restaurants that make everything from scratch whenever possible. It's there's also a restaurant on Staten Island which is a real sleeper, and people are discouraged by the name, I think, culinary wise, but it's called Ralph's Sports Bar. Okay. It's fairly new. They opened up in the pandemic, and they do a marvelous job. It's like the best burger that you'll ever have. It's at this place. It's a sports bar. Yeah, it's very, very good. It's in Dongan Hills, not too far from the Dongan Hills train station. We have a lot of Chinese restaurants that have opened up. As the demographic changes on Staten Island, we have a lot more cuisine that reflects that. One of the restaurants that's really interesting, that's newer, is called Zara Restaurant. It's a Turkish restaurant, and it's where there was a Perkins restaurant. It's on the North Shore. There's 3 Zara restaurants, but the one that I love is does a really great job with birthdays. So if you're very shy, this is not the place to have a birthday. They do, sing and do all sorts of crazy stuff with fireworks and things like that, and massive meat platters. And
or bring a shy person, have them come out of their shell.
Right, it's a great way. So even if it's not somebody's birthday and you really want to surprise them, newer places. Shaunae's house. She is wonderful. I know she's been a guest on your show, and she always pleases with the small hospitality. She's only had 6 tables. She's only open Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And maybe that's the way to do it, is to have a very, honed in, small, manageable restaurant and do other things, because she ran a lovely festival, right?
Yeah. She's incredible. And that's, talk about like a family business. Last time, after I had her on the show, we had a couple of these clips that just went viral. And I was actually at the restaurant, and I was coming out of the restroom, and some woman was going in, and she's like, "Hey, it's you." And I'm like, "What?" She goes, "Oh, I actually saw the clip of your interview with Shaunae from the podcast, and that's why I'm here right now."
That's so nice.
And we just started talking and everything, and we were looking around, like in the back of the restaurant, everyone signs their name with a little note, and, seeing the whole family there. And, there still is that family aspect of the business, but I think what we were saying earlier, that it's more and more difficult to run a small family-owned business because of, the different challenges. So those that are out there, it's so important to go out, support them. Thankfully, there still are so many in New York City, but so often when you speak to them, it's, the rents and the labor costs and the regulations and all this stuff that make it frustrating. This true or not, and maybe it's more nuanced, but a lot of restaurateurs I speak with on Staten Island, and this is maybe something that started during the pandemic, and that was part with the shutdowns, but frustrating. They go, everyone's going to New Jersey. Our customers, it's much easier for them to go to New Jersey. It costs less money. People are going and opening restaurants on New Jersey, and
Andrew.
New York needs to be doing a lot more to keep people on Staten Island in New York City than just going to Jersey.
You touched on a very sore point. Yes, actually, I've looked at this quite a bit and to see, what was going on. And it turns out there's an active draw to New Jersey, partially Woodbridge specifically. The mayor of Woodbridge, who is a lovely man, Mayor Mack, he comes to Staten Island and he finds restaurant owners like Peter Botros and the Malerba family that owns Angelina's, and he recognizes the greatness in them, and he sees that they're hard workers. So he's like, I want you, and he'll has a space in Woodbridge in one of the several townships, the towns there. And in fact, there's a guy named Mike Strickland who is a Woodbridge native who has a very nice steakhouse called the West Shore Inn on Staten Island. And he has a steakhouse called Strickland's, which was his second restaurant in his native hometown of Woodbridge. And it was a likely move for him to go from Travis on Staten Island to, open up this place where his grandfather actually had to do with the building of the bank, and the clock that was established outside in Woodbridge was something his grandfather put up. So he had a deep connection to Woodbridge. But years ago, there was a ferry that connected Bayonne and Staten Island. And there's all sorts of proximities to Staten Island, and people on the South Shore are very likely to go over the bridge, one of the bridges, to go to New Jersey. And, you've got to think about this. The parking is generally a lot more accommodating, especially for older people. It tends to be less expensive. Honestly, the hospitality can be a lot warmer in New Jersey. I mean, I'm sad to say that, but it goes back to the labor situation in New York City on Staten Island. And overall, Staten Island is a great place. And I generally don't leave there. I dine on Staten Island 99% of the time. I couldn't think of, occasionally I'll go to Manhattan to kind of see what's going on in Manhattan and trends and things like that. But there's nothing better than staying in your hometown. Yeah. And when it comes down to it, people stick with what they're familiar with. Yeah. And, the familiar pizza, the familiar Italian food, and that kind of go-to dish that's at like classic places like Cafe Luna on Highland Boulevard or Royal Crown Bakery, which could not be better. And honestly, I think that's one of the biggest draws to Staten Island is Royal Crown Bakery. Really? Royal Crown is huge. And they've opened up a few other places, and they've kind of branched out, and they moved into New Jersey too, yes. In Filancino, which is it's like a different brand of Royal Crown. But when it comes down to it, ultimately all great concepts start on Staten Island, believe it or not.
So, listen, I don't want to hate on New Jersey, and they could have good restaurants. And I think it's a good opportunity if someone on Staten Island has restaurants and they're successful and they get an opportunity to go, to New Jersey to open up another restaurant. But are there any things that, New York could do to help, people stay on Staten Island and eat or go to other boroughs? And, there's always that kind of state to state, competition. And just the Staten Island, New Jersey thing is something that comes up over and over and over again. I always hear. So what could we be doing? Are there any things?
What a great question. I think that the tolls, ultimately people are going to gravitate toward better service. I think that, if you're going to talk about tax abatements and credits to an entrepreneur, to a new restaurant owner, I think that it would come in giving them some sort of credit toward training, and get them to really focus on customer service. Remember years ago on Channel 5, they would have that thing, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
I sure do.
So something similar where, they're, literally programs that are through the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene instead of being aggressive on the end of fines and such, giving some sort of hand up with how to train a workforce. I think that is very lacking in New York City, whatever industry you're in. Simple, hellos or how to answer the phone. I mean, I know that sounds silly, but it really drives business when you are friendly from the get-go.
Yeah, no, I think maybe that's one of the things. I do believe through the city's Department of Small Business Services, there is like a culinary training program. I think so much of it is like also getting these programs to people so they know about it. And perhaps there needs to be like a concerted effort on Staten Island, finding people. I mean, the reality and the great thing about the restaurant industry is that, it employs people from all walks of life. You just have to be willing to learn and to work hard. But there are so many different great opportunities. So if there is a local training program, I know one of the gripes, and I think one of the advisory boards that I'm on actually with Richard Nicotra and some other Staten Island folks was addressing the city's health department food safety protection certification. And you had to, I think, go into Manhattan to take the actual exam. You could take the training online, but you had to go into Manhattan to take the exam.
Right. I remember taking that. Yeah.
Found a location on Staten Island. And I think they're still doing it. I want to check where you can actually go locally and take the training. So maybe instead of like always asking people to go far away to take a training, bring some of the training to them. And that seems like something that's not a huge lift to do, but maybe finding a school or an area where you could do a training locally, and then local restaurants could sign up and, get people from the program, send current employees there. There's so much opportunity, and sometimes you just got to like make it happen.
And I'd love to see a lot more participation with the Beard Foundation coming to Staten Island and other publications looking at us. I enjoy being the expert on Staten Island with food, but I'm willing to share. And I really would love to see a lot more people on Staten Island. And
I'm on the board of NYC Tourism, and I would love to try to figure out a way with us, the Hospitality Lines, to do something. Trying to get more restaurants signed up for Restaurant Week, some sort of different campaigns.
Is there a fee still to join?
There is. I know there were some discounts, and for a while during the pandemic when they started doing it, I believe it was free, but there is, a fee. But, so much of this stuff as well is like, how do you kind of get some buzz going? But I mean, I think, just hopping on the ferry, it's a fun trip, and if you can get off and you can go out and eat, and, if there are ways to get around, obviously, more driving, but there's walkable places, right?
Oh, yeah.
You go, so
definitely. And by towns, I do think that Staten Island is a huge little town, and kind of to bring that more into the fold of New York City, which we are definitely part of the Big Apple.
So one of the things that I'd say, especially, for you when you're writing, but also for restaurants and just people on Staten Island, one of the things with NYC Tourism on the board that we've been fighting for is funding. They have gotten their funding cut back. When you look at other cities that are much smaller than New York, they are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars more. And it makes no sense. We need to bring people here. Tourism is one of those things where it's actually an investment. There's so many things the city funds that are an expense. They're necessary, but they're an expense. Whereas tourism, for every dollar you invest, more money comes back.
Yes.
People come here, they spend money at local businesses, it generates tax revenue. So it would be great just citywide, in Staten Island, to talk about funding and getting people there, because there are such great experiences. And even when you're talking about like chickens, most people, in the city don't even realize, unless Staten Island, or they come to the city like, oh, wow, like you drive through Staten Island, it has so much different the topography, or just, like you have, like you said, towns, but you have like suburb areas, there's a lot to see in this, different. And it's great to get people there to go out and try these different restaurants and explore and see what's happening.
Well, I am going to tell you, the road to success with getting Staten Island more involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I, no matter what borough, I'm going to say that the very underutilized bids that are, the business improvements districts, I think that those are very underutilized. And right now, the New Door Merchants Association, which is the East Shore bid, they do a restaurant crawl there, which is very, very good every year. That is run by the SIEDC. If only the SIEDC, the tourism folks, the borough president, imagine if they all worked together, it would be so awesome. So I'd really love to see that more, a lot more collaboration between different city agencies and things like that, especially where taxpayer money is going to fund these things.
Yeah.
The West Brighton bid, the Forest Avenue Business Improvement District, love to see more going on there with tourism and kind of a collaboration with the New York City
anything
tourism.
I can do to help kind of promote it and hype it up and
Yeah.
get people to be part of the conversation, because my sense is when you get people in a room and you start talking about it, people throw out ideas.
Yes,
and,
I love
things
brainstorming.
In motion tend to stay in motion.
Mhm.
And I think when things get kind of stagnant or there's so many different parties and there's not that one kind of uniter that brings everyone in and pulls everyone and says, all right, we got to do something.
Yes.
And then sit down and figure out what that something is. And even just starting, small, it allows it to grow into something, larger that brings economic activity, gets people excited,
Yes.
makes people feel like, government or other groups are being responsive, to them and, acknowledging them. It's all, it's important. You were on total switch. TV, Bobby Flay.
Beat Bobby Flay, yes.
Uh-oh, what happened?
Yes, I was a judge on Beat Bobby Flay. Haven't been asked back, I guess,
Okay.
right? Just, he didn't win.
Oh,
Spoiler
wow.
alert, on the show that I judged. It was a really fun experience. I really enjoyed that. That was a lot of effort to kind of get there and whatnot. And what like a lasting effect that you don't realize how many people watch Food Network until you have been on there. Every time the episode airs, I get people who reach out from all over, and people recognize me on Staten Island more from Beat Bobby Flay than
Really?
they do from,
Wow.
They'll come up to me and, oh my gosh, I saw that episode. What did you really think? And I was like, I really thought it wasn't good. But anyway, it was very interesting. Also, I write, and I was talking to you about this before, I write a lot about, growing up in the restaurant business. My uncle Jim McMullen, was a Ford model who opened up 2 restaurants on the Upper East Side. One was called Harper's.
Okay.
It was right near J.G. Mellon's. And then he moved further up the block to open a restaurant called Jim McMullen's. And it was, a lot of people came through there. And it was the time in the late 70s, early 80s when things were booming. And Brooke Shields had eaten in the restaurant and was young and beautiful. And, my father, who was a New York City school teacher, would come in to eat. We'd come in often to eat on Saturday nights. And we would come with my mom, who was the bookkeeper in the restaurant. And we'd sit at a nice table and we'd sort of people watch and, see Rock Hudson. Rock Hudson ate there. And, it was just so much fun. There was Reggie Jackson, actually, and a lot of the Yankees like to dine there whenever, tennis was going on. It was people, all the tennis stars would come in, and it was just, it was truly a vibrant time and one that I really miss in New York City, where the average neighborhood restaurant, if they didn't have linens, they would have really great burgers and great soups and hearty items like chicken pot pie. It was this sort of transition between the nice French restaurant and the neighborhood place that was approachable for people, I don't know, to just have a nice meal.
What are things when you go out with this, experience of both being in the restaurant business, writing about restaurants? What do you look for when you go into restaurants? Like, are there certain things you look at just to see if they're up to par or how they're doing it?
Interesting. I can usually tell what's going on in a restaurant from walking in the door and smelling the restaurant, believe it or not. You could kind of smell if it's clean, if things are cooking, baking. There's always a scent that escapes from the kitchen and the exhaust system. So it's just, I love a restaurant that's very approachable and clean and has a formality to it, even in a neighborhood place. Like I mentioned, Ralph's Sports Bar. I mean, that sounds silly, but they approach you like you matter, from the second that you walk through the door. They make eye contact. That's always a good sign. And that everything is made from scratch. And that the server is so proud of something like, oh my gosh, look at this. We make that butter. Or look at this. This sauce is so delicious. I love it. We eat it every night for family meal. Something like that. Like the general enthusiasm. I love that when the staff is like totally engaged. And that's
it's like your senses. You walk in the door and all of these senses just perk up, and
exactly.
then the people, embrace you as well. You recently published an article. We spoke about it, and I know you try to stay away from politics, but it was about the big, beautiful bill and the no tax on tips. And I realized one of the restaurateurs kind of remained anonymous and saying that they didn't want to get, I'm paraphrasing, basically like they didn't want to speak publicly about politics.
Right.
There's all different politics. Everyone has them. But how much do you think, if at all, just the state of politics has an effect on the restaurant business? Obviously, there's a lot of people on Staten Island that tend to, be a bit more conservative, that have voted more Republican, obviously not exclusively, but people say what's going on in the political world affects how they're feeling, and how people are feeling influences whether they go out and have a good time, if they're spending money. Are there kind of political anxieties, political excitements that you think are influencing how people are dining out and spending money on Staten Island?
What a great question. Oh my goodness. I think that once you put your political persuasion on the door for like a political sign, it's either a boon to business or the kiss of death.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important that people don't put signs in the restaurant, but it works to your favor sometimes on Staten Island, I will say. And I'll give you a perfect example. Joyce's Tavern is, they are a lovely family business. They are a lovely family business, and they are very vocal about politics, and people love that. They love it about Joyce's, and then the family that runs it is wonderful, and and their steadfastness and their consistency is to their credit. And they muddled through a very difficult time during the pandemic, where they were outright accused of violating distancing practices and things like that because of how they voted and how they felt politically. It was like literally a hit job on them. Very upsetting to watch that and write about it. Very upsetting to see that the government would like attack a citizen over their politics. I've just never forgot that. That was really upsetting.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, restaurants and our tables are a place where people can come down and sometimes, talk about politics, but other times just leave the politics at the door and sit down, have a great meal, have a great conversation, and connect on a human level.
Yeah.
Because I feel like whatever your politics are, we can better understand each other and become friends on other issues when you're sitting around a table at a restaurant, which will then make it easier if you have that bond to deal with some more of those, thorny issues when you're outside of the restaurant. But
absolutely, food is a unifier. Food is unity. I mean, even if you don't have politics that align, ultimately we're all human beings sitting down at a table and eating a meal. I mean, that is what it's about.
Amen.
But
all right. So before we finish up, let's just get really, really positive about I know we talked about a lot of good Staten Island restaurants, but what are some great things you've eaten recently? When you're going out for a restaurant, you mentioned like what you like walk in, the smell, you like to be welcomed, you like the server to tell you about the sauce and, all of this stuff. So what makes your job in writing about food, so special, particularly with a Staten Island lens on it that like gets you up in the morning?
Well, I so enjoy some real surprises, like this delicious pork chop, for instance, it sounds mundane, but it's not, with hot cherry peppers, or this unctuous pizza that is like got the cheese. It's almost like Munster cheese baked into the crust of a Sicilian pie at Killsborough. which is a new, it's a brewery that was at a restaurant called Craft House, which is still there in Stapleton, but Killsborough moved over to a bigger brewing facility right next to Snug Harbor Cultural Center. And they do such a nice job. It's getting its footing, but it's got such promise. It's such a beautiful restaurant, delicious. I love going to a pork store on Staten Island, like Italo's Fine Foods or Pastosa. And the Pastosas around the island, they all have like warm, fresh mozzarella that they put on the counter. It's like hot and delicious. I love that. That is sensational. And also we have really wonderful Sri Lankan food, Indian food. There's a place called Taste of India too that has been on New Durham Lane for like 30 something years. And they make such beautiful food. I mean, naan bread, fresh from the tandoor, absolutely stunning. And all their sauces, everything is made with such precision. You could taste that food at any day, any time of the week, and it is absolutely consistent. And then I know this is a little, it seems a little odd, but it's pretty awesome. There's a place called Harvest Cafe that just reopened after a year-long renovation. It is it's actually like a training restaurant for special needs Staten Islanders, and they do such a nice job with comfort food. Oh wow! They follow the seasons really beautifully. They have things like pumpkin pancakes, and I mean, I'm just drooling thinking about some of the stuff that I saw there just the other day. Warm butter syrup on things. I mean, it's just like if you're watching carbs, it's not the place for you. But hot biscuits, really delicious stuff going on.
So you have all classic Italian, Sri Lankan, which is so good, Indian, these other places. Made me think of also. I know the Nicotras have it's a Commons Cafe, and then they have the Pizzeria, which is like a nonprofit restaurant, and they put it back into the community for all different philanthropic causes. I just think there's so much rich culinary history and kind of everything that's happening on Staten Island. So if people live there, yes, they maybe go to Jersey once in a while, but they should continue to go out and support all the local businesses. And people should come from elsewhere, from all over, go visit Staten Island, go eat at all of these different places, check the borough out. And then, what about writing in the future? Are there certain stories or certain things that are on the horizon that you are interested in writing stories about, or you think that are going to happen, that are going to influence the restaurant scene in the near future?
Interesting. Well, I think that we are going to be the best in dim sum one day. The Asian population on Staten Island is truly booming. I mentioned that. But also one day our Filipino food will be known for the ages. We really do have they have something called Kamayan at this one restaurant, which is this feast down the middle of a table, where everybody eats with their hands and things like that. We really are a niche place. And I love to write about the smells, the tastes of niche restaurants, things that nobody else is doing. And it sounds like it's not weird and it's not oddball. It just makes Staten Island stand out and makes people very curious about the borough. So I love writing about that.
Beautiful. So we should plan something. I'll come to Staten Island. We'll get a bunch of people together. There's so many great places we could go to. That was kind of like a tourism ad. The way you said that, I was a bit hypnotized, like listening to the different food and cuisines and everything.
So thank you.
Pamela Silvestri, Staten Island Advance, who's been in the restaurant industry as well, which gives her a special lens when she's writing and talking about all things food and restaurants. Thank you for coming on Hospitality and Politics.
Thank you.
I'm Andrew Ridgey. The show is powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. Go eat on Staten Island. They got some really, really great food. Thanks, everyone. Talk next time.
Thank you.